I stood in the bridal suite bathroom staring at my reflection with a red handprint across my cheek. The sound of 155 wedding guests chattering outside contrasted with the silence in my head. My father's words echoed, "Give Bill and Susan your penthouse." My own whispered response still hung in the air, "You just lost me." The wedding reception continued below, but everything had changed. My brother's marriage celebration had become the day my family destroyed itself. I touched my burning cheek and made a decision that would alter everything. 6 hours earlier, I had driven through the rolling hills of Napa Valley, my silver sedan winding along the vineyard roads toward what I thought would be a beautiful family celebration. The morning sun cast golden light across the grapevines, and I felt genuinely happy for my brother Bill. After 32 years of life, I had learned to find joy in small moments like these. My name is Brie, and at 28, I had built what most people would consider a successful life. As a senior marketing director at a major tech company in San Francisco, I earned my place in the corporate world through 7 years of 80-hour work weeks, missed dinners, and sacrificed weekends. My penthouse overlooking the bay was more than just an apartment. It represented every late night I spent perfecting presentations, every client meeting where I proved my worth, and every promotion I earned through sheer determination. The vineyard venue looked like something from a fairy tale. Elegant stone buildings nestled between acres of perfectly manicured vines, with string lights already hung for the evening reception. I pulled into the parking area and spotted my parents' car immediately. Dale and Margaret had driven up from their home in Sacramento earlier that morning. Walking toward the main building, I carried the envelope containing my wedding gift payment receipts for the flowers and photography. It had cost me $8,000, but seeing Bill happy felt worth every penny. Growing up, he had always been the charming one, the golden child who could make our parents laugh with his quick wit and easy smile. Where I was serious and driven, Bill floated through life with natural charisma that opened doors without effort. Our family dynamics had always been clear. Bill was the star, the one who would someday achieve great things once he found his direction. I was the responsible one, the daughter who took care of details and cleaned up messes. Throughout childhood, I watched my parents beam with pride when Bill brought home average grades, while I needed perfect scores to earn a fraction of that approval. Despite this imbalance, I loved my family deeply. I worked harder, partly to prove I deserved their attention, but also because I genuinely wanted to make them proud. Success became my way of showing love, even when it often went unrecognized. Bill had been through several career changes since college sales restaurant management, even a brief stint trying to become a personal trainer. Nothing seemed to stick, but our parents always encouraged his exploration while expecting me to have my entire life mapped out by age 16. When he announced his engagement to Susan 6 months ago, I was thrilled. Maybe marriage would give him the stability and motivation he needed. Susan came from a wealthy family in Marin County. Her father owned several successful restaurants, and her mother had inherited money from her grandfather's real estate investments. They seemed like the perfect match, Bill's charm and Susan's family connections. I looked forward to welcoming her into our small family. Walking through the vineyard's main building, I found my parents in the bridal preparation area. Margaret was arranging flowers while Dale adjusted his tie in a mirror. They both looked nervous, which I attributed to normal wedding day jitters. "Brie, sweetheart, you look beautiful," Margaret said, though her smile seemed forced. She had chosen a navy blue dress that complemented her gray hair, styled more formally than usual. "Thank you, Mom. Where's Bill? Is he getting ready upstairs?" Dale cleared his throat uncomfortably. "He's with his groomsmen at the hotel. They'll be here soon for pictures." His answer came out rushed, and he avoided making direct eye contact. Something felt off, but I pushed the feeling aside. Wedding days were stressful for everyone involved. I spent the next hour helping with final preparations, arranging centerpieces, and greeting arriving relatives. Several family members I hadn't seen in years made the trip, including my Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe from Portland, and various cousins who had scattered across the country after college. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Bill looked handsome in his black tuxedo, standing nervously at the altar as guests filled the rows of white chairs arranged on the vineyard's main lawn. When the music began and Susan appeared in her flowing white gown, I felt tears in my eyes. She truly looked radiant, and Bill's face lit up with genuine love as she walked down the aisle. During the vows, I noticed how Bill's voice shook with emotion as he promised to love and provide for Susan. She spoke about building a life together and supporting each other through whatever challenges came their way. The words felt meaningful and sincere, making me optimistic about their future. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour before dinner, I mingled with guests and caught up with relatives. Several people complimented my emerald green dress and asked about my work. I enjoyed sharing stories about recent marketing campaigns and upcoming projects. For the first time in months, I felt relaxed and genuinely happy. That's when I began noticing the strange conversations. Uncle Joe mentioned something about family support and how nice it was that I had done so well for myself. Aunt Linda asked pointed questions about my living situation and whether I ever felt lonely in such a big place by myself. Cousins I barely knew seemed unusually interested in my income and savings. At first, I chalked it up to typical family curiosity. Extended relatives often asked personal questions at gatherings, but the pattern became impossible to ignore when the rehearsal dinner toast began. Dale stood up with his champagne glass, his face flushed from nervousness and alcohol. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Bill and Susan's special day. Marriage is about family coming together, about supporting each other through thick and thin." He paused and looked directly at me. The room grew quiet as his gaze lingered longer than felt natural. "Bill and Susan are starting their life together, and they're going to need family support as they build their future. Some of us are in a position to help more than others, and family always comes through when it matters most." The silence that followed felt heavy and awkward. Guests glanced around uncertainly, unsure how to respond to what sounded less like a wedding toast and more like a pointed statement. I felt my cheeks burning as I realized every eye in the room had followed Dale's gaze to me. Bill shifted uncomfortably beside Susan, who was staring at her lap with an expression I couldn't read. Margaret's smile looked frozen in place, and she avoided looking in my direction entirely. As applause finally broke the tension, I felt a cold understanding settle in my stomach. This wedding invitation hadn't just been about celebrating Bill and Susan's love. It had come with expectations I was only beginning to understand. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and growing anxiety. I kept catching family members whispering and glancing my way. When people asked about my job or my apartment, their questions felt less like genuine interest and more like they were gathering information for some purpose I couldn't yet identify. After dinner, as guests moved toward the reception area, I overheard Susan talking to one of her bridesmaids about finally having some stability and not having to worry about money anymore. When she noticed me nearby, she quickly changed the subject to thank me again for the beautiful flowers. But the damage was done. As I walked alone through the vineyard's gardens, trying to process what I was sensing, I realized that everyone except me seemed to know something important. The wedding I thought was about love, and new beginnings was beginning to feel like an elaborate setup for something I wasn't prepared to face. The reception was in full swing when my parents found me near the wine tasting room, a private space tucked away from the main celebration. The sound of laughter and music drifted through the windows, but inside this intimate stone-walled room, the atmosphere felt entirely different. "Brie, we need to talk," Dale said, closing the door behind him. Margaret followed her earlier nervous energy, replaced by a grim determination that made my stomach clench. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" I asked, though every instinct told me I wasn't going to like whatever came next. Dale and Margaret exchanged a look that confirmed my fears. They had planned this conversation, rehearsed it even. Whatever they were about to tell me had been building for weeks or months. "Sit down, sweetheart," Margaret said, gesturing toward one of the leather chairs arranged around a small table. The room smelled of oak and old wine, usually a comforting combination that now felt suffocating. "We should have talked about this sooner." Dale began pacing behind Margaret's chair. His face had taken on the serious expression he usually reserved for discussing money or family crises. "But we kept hoping we could work things out on our own." "Work what out?" I asked, though part of me already knew this conversation would somehow involve me solving a problem I hadn't created. Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she spoke. "Bill and Susan are in trouble, Brie. Serious financial trouble. Bill lost his job at the marketing firm 3 months ago, but they were too embarrassed to tell anyone. He's been pretending to go to work while actually looking for something new." The revelation hit me like cold water. 3 months. Bill had been unemployed for 3 months while planning an expensive wedding and acting like everything was perfect. Why didn't he say anything I could have helped him update his resume or make connections in my industry? "It gets worse," Dale continued. "They have over $80,000 in credit card debt. Susan's student loans from her master's degree add another $50,000. They've been living off credit for 2 years using one card to pay minimums on others." I felt dizzy processing these numbers. $130,000 in debt for 2 people who had no stable income and no clear plan for repayment. How did it get so bad? Doesn't Susan's family have money? Margaret's voice became bitter. "Her parents cut her off financially when she got engaged to Bill. They never thought he was good enough for her, and they told her if she married beneath her station, she'd have to live with the consequences." "That's awful," I said, genuinely sympathetic to their situation. "But I still don't understand what this has to do with me." Dale stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "We mortgaged our house to pay for this wedding. $35,000 borrowed against the equity we spent 40 years building. We figured Bill would find new work soon, and Susan's family would come around eventually. You mortgaged your house, Dad, that was incredibly risky." "We know that now," Margaret said, wiping her eyes. "But we wanted to give Bill a beautiful wedding. We thought it would be our contribution to starting their marriage off right." The pieces were starting to come together in a way that made me increasingly uncomfortable. "How much trouble are you in because of this decision?" Dale's shoulders sagged as he admitted the truth. "We're 3 months behind on the new mortgage payments. The bank sent a foreclosure notice last week. We have 60 days to bring the loan current, or we lose the house." I sat in stunned silence. My parents, who had always seemed financially stable if not wealthy, were facing the loss of their family home. The house where I grew up, where they had planned to retire and eventually leave to Bill and me, was about to be taken by the bank. "I'm so sorry this happened," I said carefully. "But I still don't understand what you want from me." Margaret looked at Dale, who nodded grimly before speaking. "Your penthouse is worth $1.2 million, Brie. You own it outright, no mortgage. Bill and Susan could live there, build equity instead of paying rent, and have the stability they need to get back on their feet. The room went completely silent except for the distant sound of wedding music. I stared at my parents, trying to process what they were suggesting. "You want me to give Bill and Susan my apartment?" "Not permanently," Dale said quickly. "Just until they can buy something of their own. Maybe 5 or 10 years. 5 or 10 years. My voice came out higher than intended. "Dad, that's my home. I worked 7 years to afford that place. I saved every penny, took on extra projects, missed vacations, and social events to make those mortgage payments." "We know you worked hard," Margaret said. "But you're just one person, honey. You don't need that much space. Bill and Susan want to start a family. They need room to grow." The casual dismissal of my accomplishments stung worse than any direct insult could have. Just one person, as if my success and independence were somehow less valuable because I wasn't married with children. "I love my apartment," I said firmly. "It's not just about space or financial value. It's my sanctuary, my achievement, my proof that I can take care of myself." Dale's tone shifted toward frustration. "This is about family, Brie. Family helps family when times get tough. You have more than you need while your brother is struggling. Bill is struggling because he made poor financial decisions," I shot back. "I can't fix his problems by giving away everything I've worked for." "So you're just going to let your brother and his wife end up homeless?" Margaret asked, her tears flowing freely now. "You're going to let us lose our house because you're too selfish to help." The word selfish hung in the air like a physical blow. Throughout my entire childhood, I had been the responsible one, the daughter who helped with chores and followed rules and took care of everyone else's needs. Now, because I wouldn't give away my most valuable possession, I was selfish. "This isn't about being selfish," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This is about boundaries and consequences. I can help Bill find a job or connect him with opportunities, but I won't sacrifice my security for his mistakes." Dale's face was growing red with anger. "Your security. You make 6 figures a year, Brie. You'll be fine no matter where you live. Bill and Susan have nothing. They have nothing because they spent money they didn't have on a lifestyle they couldn't afford," I replied. "Giving them my apartment doesn't solve the underlying problem. It just enables more bad decisions." Susan appeared in the doorway, her wedding dress rustling as she entered the private room. Her face was flushed with excitement, and she seemed oblivious to the tension that filled the space. "Are you telling her about our surprise?" she asked brightly. "I've been so excited ever since we started planning this. I already have ideas for redecorating the living room and turning one of the bedrooms into a nursery." My blood turned to ice. Redecorating nursery. Susan's smile faltered as she realized something was wrong. "Didn't they explain we're moving into your penthouse next month? I've been researching the best furniture stores in the city, and I found this amazing design consultant who specializes in modern family spaces." "Nobody's moving into my penthouse," I said quietly. "But your parents said..." Susan looked confused and hurt. "They told us you were excited to help us start our life together." I turned to stare at my parents, who both avoided eye contact. "You told them I already agreed." Margaret stammered out an excuse. "We thought once you understood the situation, you'd want to do the right thing." The right thing would have been asking me first before making promises to other people. I said, my anger finally breaking through the shock. Dale stepped forward aggressively. "Don't talk to your mother that way. We're trying to keep this family together, and you're being difficult about something that doesn't even matter that much to you." "Doesn't matter that much. It's my home, Dad. It's everything I've worked for." "And family is everything we've all worked for," he shot back. 40 years of marriage, raising 2 children, building relationships and traditions. Are you really going to throw all of that away because you don't want to share? Susan had started crying, her perfect wedding makeup running down her cheeks. I don't understand what's happening. Your parents said you loved me like a sister. They said you wanted to help us succeed. I do want you to succeed, I said gently. But success that comes from taking someone else's property isn't real success. It's dependency. So what are we supposed to do? Susan asked desperately. We can't afford an apartment in the city. We have nowhere to go. Before I could answer, Dale delivered the blow I should have seen coming. We already told people, Brie. The wedding announcement cards mention your generous gift. Half the guests tonight know you're giving Bill and Susan the penthouse as a wedding present. The room spun around me as I processed this betrayal. They hadn't just presumed my compliance. They had made it public knowledge before even asking my permission. The strange questions from relatives, the pointed comments about family support, the awkward silences, it all made sense now. You announced it without my consent. I could barely get the words out. We figured you'd want to do the right thing once you understood how much they needed help, Margaret said weakly. The right thing would have been respecting my right to make my own decisions about my own property, I replied, standing up from my chair. As I moved toward the door, Susan grabbed my arm. Please, Brie. I know this is overwhelming, but we really are desperate. I'll take good care of your apartment, I promise. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then into her tear-streaked face. Behind her, my parents watched with expressions that mixed hope and desperation with increasing anger. They had set up this entire scenario expecting me to cave under pressure to choose family harmony over my own needs and rights. Let go of my arm, Susan, I said quietly. She released me immediately, stepping back with fresh tears. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just thought... You thought I would give you my home because other people decided I should... I finished for her. That's not how gifts work. That's not how family works. And that's not how respect works. Dale's face had turned dangerous shades of red. If you walk out of this room without agreeing to help your brother, you're going to regret it. Is that a threat, Dad? It's a promise. Family comes first, and if you can't understand that maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family. I looked at each of them, my father, with his barely contained rage, my mother with her manipulative tears, and Susan with her entitled expectations. For the first time in my life, I saw them clearly without the filter of love and loyalty that had obscured their behavior for decades. Maybe you're right, I said, reaching for the door handle. Maybe I don't deserve a family that thinks love means giving away everything I've earned. As I opened the door to leave, Margaret called out desperately, Brie, please, we can work this out. We just need to discuss it more. No, Mom. You need to tell your guests that you made an announcement without my permission and that there will be no penthouse gift. You need to apologize to Susan for promising her something that wasn't yours to give. And you need to figure out how to solve your financial problems without expecting me to sacrifice my life to fix them. I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding, but my mind clearer than it had been in hours. Behind me, I could hear Susan crying harder and my parents frantically whispering about damage control. But for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe properly. The wedding reception was still in full swing, but everything about it looked different now. The laughter felt forced, the music too loud, the celebration hollow. I had to get through the rest of this evening, but I would do it with full knowledge of where I stood in my family's priorities. What I didn't know was that the worst was yet to come. I tried to blend back into the reception, but the elegant ballroom that had felt welcoming earlier now seemed like a stage where I was the unwitting star of a show I never auditioned for. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables covered in ivory linens, and the dance floor buzzed with celebrating guests. Under normal circumstances, I would have enjoyed the sophisticated atmosphere and excellent food. Instead, I found myself analyzing every conversation, wondering which guests knew about the supposed penthouse gift and what exactly they had been told. When Cousin Rachel asked how I felt about helping the newlyweds get started, I knew the announcement had spread throughout the wedding party. Actually, I said carefully, there seems to have been some miscommunication about that. Rachel's eyebrows raised with interest. Oh, I thought your dad said during his toast that family always comes through for each other. The toast, of course. Dale's pointed remarks about family support hadn't been general wedding sentiments, they had been a public setup for what he expected me to do. Every guest who heard that speech was now waiting to see how I would demonstrate that support. I excused myself and headed toward the bride and groom's table where Bill was cutting wedding cake with Susan. They both looked tense despite their smiles, and I noticed several wedding guests pointing in my direction while whispering among themselves. Bill, I said quietly when I reached his side, we need to talk privately. His face went pale beneath his tan. Brie, not now. People are watching. That's exactly why we need to talk now, I replied. Before this gets any worse? Susan grabbed Bill's arm possessively. Whatever family drama is happening, it needs to wait until after our wedding day. The family drama is about you and Bill moving into my apartment, I said bluntly, which isn't happening. Several nearby guests turned to stare at us. Bill's best man, a guy named Carter. I had met earlier, stepped closer with obvious concern. Everything okay here? Carter asked. Everything's fine, Bill said quickly. Just some family discussion about logistics. Logistics, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it when parents promise away their daughter's home without asking her first? Susan's face crumpled. You're ruining my wedding day, she whispered. I'm trying to prevent it from getting worse, I replied. But apparently your husband and my parents have different ideas about that. Margaret appeared beside us, her own face streaked with tears and desperation. Brie, honey, you're causing a scene. Can't we discuss this privately? We already discussed it privately. I said, my voice carrying more than I intended. That's where you told me you've already announced to everyone here that I'm giving away my penthouse, so now we get to discuss it publicly. The conversations around us had stopped completely. Guests at nearby tables were openly staring now, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a family meltdown at a wedding reception. Dale materialized behind Margaret, his face darker than I had ever seen it. That's enough, Brie. You're embarrassing this entire family. I'm embarrassing the family. My voice rose despite my attempts to stay calm. You're the one who made promises about my property without my permission. You're the one who turned my brother's wedding into an extortion attempt. Don't be dramatic, Dale snapped. Nobody's extorting anything. We're asking for help. Asking would involve giving me a choice, I shot back. This was a demand disguised as a request. Bill stepped between us, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Guys, please. Can we find a way to work this out? Tonight is supposed to be about love and family unity. Your wife has been planning to redecorate my apartment, I said to him directly. She's picked out furniture and hired a design consultant. Does that sound like a request to you? Bill's face went completely white. He looked at Susan, who was now sobbing openly in her wedding dress, while their guests watched in fascination and horror. Susan, you didn't... Bill started. Your parents said she was excited to help, Susan wailed. They said she wanted us to be happy and successful. I thought I was supposed to start planning our life together. Our life together doesn't include my sister's apartment, Bill said weakly. But his protest came too late and with too little conviction. Dale's patience finally snapped completely. Enough of this selfishness. He roared, his voice carrying across the entire ballroom. You have everything you need and more, Brie. Your brother has nothing. A decent person would help without being asked twice. A decent family would ask before announcing. I replied, my own anger finally matching his. A decent family would respect my right to say no. You don't have the right to say no when family needs you, Dale shot back. The entire reception had stopped. Servers stood frozen with platters of cake, the band had quit playing mid-song, and every single guest was staring at our table with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to fascination. Camera phones were definitely recording now, capturing what had to be one of the most spectacular family meltdowns in recent wedding history. I absolutely have the right to say no, I said firmly. It's my apartment. I earned it. I paid for it. And I'm not giving it away because you think I should. Margaret stepped forward with tears streaming down her face. How can you be so cruel? Your brother needs help, and you have the power to change his life. His life changed when he chose to spend money he didn't have for 2 years, I replied. My apartment won't fix the problems that created this situation. Dale moved closer, his face inches from mine now. Several guests started to stand up, sensing that the confrontation was escalating beyond normal family argument territory. You ungrateful little bitch, Dale snarled. We gave you everything growing up. We paid for your college, supported your career, cheered for your success. And this is how you repay us. The words hit like physical blows, especially delivered in front of 155 wedding guests who were now witnessing my father call me names in public. You supported my career so you could cash in on it later. I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. This isn't about gratitude. This is about you thinking my success belongs to the whole family. It does belong to the family, Dale shouted. Family shares everything. That's what love means. No, Dad. Love means wanting what's best for someone even when it's not convenient for you. Love means respecting boundaries and choices. Love doesn't come with price tags and conditions. Susan was hyperventilating now, her wedding dress heaving as she struggled to breathe through her panic attack. Bill knelt beside her chair, trying to calm her down, while shooting desperate looks between his parents and me. Please, Bill begged, just stop fighting. We'll figure something else out. Susan, it's okay. We'll find another solution. There is no other solution, Dale bellowed. Your sister is the only one with money and she's too selfish to share it. That's when I reached my breaking point. 28 years of being the responsible one, the overlooked daughter, the family member who solved problems and cleaned up messes, while Bill got all the attention and praise. 28 years of working twice as hard for half the recognition. 28 years of accepting that my needs came second to everyone else's wants. I'm done, I said, starting to turn away from the table. That's when Dale completely lost control. His hand moved faster than I could process, connecting with my cheek in a slap so hard that it echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. The force of it snapped my head to the side and sent sharp pain radiating through my skull. The silence that followed was absolute and deafening. 155 wedding guests sat in stunned shock as my father stood over me with his hand still raised, his face twisted with rage and embarrassment. I touched my burning cheek, feeling the heat and swelling that was already beginning. When I looked up at Dale, He seemed as shocked by his own action as everyone else in the room. "Dad," Bill whispered in horror. Margaret covered her mouth with both hands, staring at her husband as if she had never seen him before. Susan had stopped crying entirely, her mouth hanging open as she processed what had just happened. But I felt strangely calm. The slap had hurt both physically and emotionally, but it had also clarified everything about my relationship with my family. In that moment of violence and public humiliation, I finally understood exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of love and respect. I smiled, not a happy smile, but a sad, knowing smile that contained 28 years of finally understanding what I had been too loyal to see before. And then I spoke quietly enough that only my immediate family could hear me over the shocked murmurs of the wedding guests. "You just lost me." The words hung in the air between us, quiet but final. Dale's hand was still raised, his face frozen in shock at what he had done. Margaret stared at both of us with her hands covering her mouth, and Bill looked like he might be sick. But I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The sharp pain in my cheek was real, the public humiliation was complete, and every bridge between me and my family was burning. Yet for the first time in hours, maybe years, I knew exactly who I was and what I needed to do. I straightened my shoulders and looked around the ballroom at the sea of shocked faces. Relatives, family friends, work colleagues, and complete strangers all stared at me with expressions ranging from horror to sympathy to barely concealed excitement at witnessing such spectacular drama. Uncle Joe had half risen from his chair, clearly debating whether to intervene. Cousin Rachel was openly filming with her phone, her mouth agape. Several of Susan's bridesmaids huddled together, whispering urgently their colorful dresses, a stark contrast to the dark tension that had settled over the celebration. Near the band setup, I noticed Carter talking rapidly on his phone, probably calling someone for advice or help. The wedding planner stood frozen by the cake table, clearly out of her depth for handling family violence at upscale events. "Brie," Margaret whispered desperately. "Honey, your father didn't mean—" "Yes, he did," I interrupted gently. "He meant every bit of it. You all did." I turned to address the room, my voice carrying clearly in the unnatural silence. "I want to apologize to all the guests here tonight. You came to celebrate Bill and Susan's wedding, and instead, you've witnessed a family disagreement that should have been handled privately." Several people nodded appreciatively. An elderly woman I didn't recognize actually smiled at me with obvious approval of my grace under pressure. "There will be no penthouse gift," I continued calmly. "My parents announced something they had no right to promise, and I want to make sure everyone understands that their announcement was made without my knowledge or consent." Dale found his voice, though it came out cracked and uncertain. "Brie, you don't need to—" "I absolutely do need to," I said firmly. "Since you made this public, I'm making my response public too." I looked directly at Bill and Susan, who were both crying now for entirely different reasons than they had been an hour earlier. "I wish you both genuine happiness and success in your marriage. I hope you'll find a way to build a life together that's based on your own efforts and choices rather than expectations about what other people should give you." Susan's sobs intensified, but Bill reached for my hand. "Brie, please. We can fix this. We can all just calm down and—" "No, Bill. Some things can't be fixed by calming down." I gently pulled my hand away. "Some things change people forever." Margaret stepped forward with renewed desperation. "You're being too dramatic, sweetheart. Family fights happen. We'll all feel different about this tomorrow when emotions aren't so high." I looked at her with genuine sadness. Mom-Dad hit me in front of 155 people because I wouldn't give away my apartment. That's not a family fight. That's abuse. The word abuse hit the room like another slap. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, and I noticed more phones appearing as people realized they were witnessing something that might have serious consequences. Dale seemed to shrink before my eyes. It wasn't. You were being impossible, and I lost my temper. You lost more than your temper, I replied. You lost your daughter. I started walking toward the exit, my emerald dress rustling softly in the continued silence. Behind me, I could hear my family scrambling to figure out what to do next. Brie, wait, Bill called out. Don't leave like this. It's my wedding day. I stopped and turned around one final time. Your wedding day stopped being about celebration the moment you decided to use it as leverage to take my home. I hope you figure out how to explain tonight to your guests, and I hope you find a way to solve your problems without destroying anyone else's life. As I reached the ballroom doors, Uncle Joe caught up with me. His face was full of concern and something that looked like guilt. Brie, honey, are you okay? Do you need someone to drive you home? I touched my still burning cheek and gave him a small smile. I'll be fine, Uncle Joe. Thank you for asking. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think you're doing the right thing. This whole situation got way out of hand. Did you know, I asked, about the Penthouse announcement? He looked uncomfortable. Your dad mentioned something about family helping family, but I had no idea they were planning to put you on the spot like this. If I had known... It's okay, I said gently. It's not your fault. As I walked through the venue's main hallway toward the parking area, I could hear the commotion continuing behind me. Voices were raised in urgent conversation, and I caught fragments of discussion about damage control and explanation strategies. My phone started buzzing with text messages before I even reached my car. Friends and colleagues who had been at the wedding were reaching out with support and concern. Apparently, several videos of the confrontation were already circulating among the guests. One message from my coworker, Jessica, read, OMG, are you okay? That was completely insane. Do you need somewhere to stay tonight? Another from my neighbor Marcus, who had been invited as my plus one, but left early due to a work emergency, said, Just saw the video. Holy shit, Brie. Call me if you need anything. Video. Multiple people had recorded the slap and were sharing it. Within hours, my family's meltdown would probably be all over social media, tagged with hashtags about wedding drama and family dysfunction. But as I drove away from the vineyard, leaving behind the string lights and celebration, and the family that had just shown me exactly how much my happiness and autonomy mattered to them, I didn't feel embarrassed or ashamed. I felt free. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to worry about disappointing my parents or living up to their expectations. I didn't have to be the responsible daughter who fixed problems and made sacrifices for the greater good of family harmony. I could just be Brie, successful, independent, and finally free to make choices based on what was best for me rather than what was convenient for everyone else. The road ahead was dark and uncertain. I would probably lose my entire family over this. Holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, graduations, and future weddings would all happen without me. The people who had shaped my childhood and supported my early dreams would become strangers. But as I drove through the California night toward my penthouse, my beautiful hard-earned penthouse that I had chosen not to sacrifice, I felt lighter than I had in months. Tomorrow, I would start building a life based on my own values and boundaries. Tonight, I had learned that sometimes losing a family is the price of finding yourself. And for the first time in 28 years, I was completely okay with that trade. The first week after the wedding passed in a blur of blocked phone calls and ignored text messages. I had changed my phone settings to send anything from my parents or Bill directly to voicemail, but I could see the notification numbers climbing daily. 37 missed calls, 62 unread texts. I deleted them all without looking. My penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay had never felt more like a sanctuary. I worked from home that first week telling my team I needed time to handle a family emergency. The irony wasn't lost on me that the emergency was my family itself. But I couldn't hide forever, and I certainly couldn't make major life decisions based on emotion alone. By Friday, I had made an appointment with Rebecca Chen, no wait. I made an appointment with Patricia Williams, a family attorney who specialized in estate planning and financial protection. I needed to understand my legal options and make sure my assets were secure from any future schemes my family might devise. Patricia's office was located in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel, that reflected the city's business district perfectly. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a no-nonsense attitude that I appreciated immediately. "Tell me what happened," she said simply, after I had settled into a leather chair across from her mahogany desk. I walked her through the wedding incident, the financial pressure, and my growing concerns about what my family might try next. Patricia took notes without interrupting, occasionally raising an eyebrow at particularly egregious details. "The slapping incident was witnessed by how many people?" she asked. 155 wedding guests, plus several people recorded it on their phones. "And they had already announced publicly that you were gifting your property before obtaining your consent." "Yes. My dad's toast made it clear that family support was expected, and several guests asked me directly about helping the newlyweds." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Brie, I need to ask you some uncomfortable questions about your family's financial behavior. Has anyone ever asked you to co-sign loans or credit applications?" "No, nothing like that." "Has anyone in your family had access to your personal documents, Social Security card, birth certificate, tax returns?" I thought carefully. "My parents have copies of some of my paperwork from when I lived with them during college breaks." "Why?" Patricia's expression grew serious. "Because what you've described sounds like the beginning of financial elder abuse tactics, except in reverse. Instead of targeting elderly parents, they're targeting their successful adult child." She explained that families experiencing financial desperation sometimes escalated from emotional manipulation to more serious forms of fraud or coercion. The public pressure at the wedding, the assumption of compliance, the elaborate planning without consent, all of these raised red flags about how far my family might be willing to go. "I want to recommend a private investigator," Patricia said. "Someone who can look into your parents' actual financial situation and see if there are any attempts to use your information inappropriately." The suggestion felt both necessary and heartbreaking. Investigating my own family felt like confirmation that our relationship was truly over, but I couldn't ignore the possibility that the wedding incident was just the beginning of more serious problems. Within 2 days, I was sitting in another downtown office this time, across from David Martinez, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases. David was younger than I expected, probably early 40s, with a calm demeanor that put me at ease despite the circumstances. "I've done preliminary research based on the information you provided," David said, opening a file folder filled with documents. "Your instincts about your family's financial situation were correct, but the reality is actually much worse than they told you." He spread several papers across his desk, credit reports, public records, and mortgage documents that painted a devastating picture of my parents' financial life. "Your father has a gambling addiction that goes back at least 12 years, David began. He's lost approximately $400,000 in casino gambling, online poker, and sports betting during that time. The number hit me like a physical blow. $400,000. More than 3 times my annual salary gone to gambling addiction, while I grew up believing my family was financially stable. Your mother has been covering for him by taking out personal loans, credit cards, and lines of credit against their house, David continued. The mortgage they took out for the wedding was actually their 4th refinancing in 8 years. They're not 3 months behind, they're 9 months behind, and the foreclosure is scheduled for next month. I stared at the documents, trying to process the scope of the deception. My parents hadn't just made one bad decision about the wedding. They had been living a lie for over a decade, hiding massive debt and addiction behind a facade of middle-class stability. What about Bill's situation? I asked. Also worse than they admitted, David said grimly. He owes money to 3 different private lenders, not just credit card companies. 2 of those lenders are what we'd classify as loan sharks. He's been borrowing money to make minimum payments on previous debts for over 2 years. David pulled out another document that made my stomach drop. But here's the most concerning part. 2 weeks before the wedding, someone attempted to take out a home equity loan using your penthouse as collateral. That's impossible. They don't have access to my property. The application was denied because the bank couldn't verify the signature, but someone tried to forge your name on the paperwork. The application listed Dale Peterson as your financial power of attorney. The room seemed to spin around me. My father had tried to steal my apartment, not just guilt me into giving it away or pressure me into sharing it. He had actually attempted to forge my signature and steal my property. Do you have any documentation that your father has power of attorney over your finances? David asked. No, absolutely not. I've never given anyone that authority. Then this was a clear case of attempted fraud. The bank has the paperwork on file, and they're required to report suspected forgery attempts to federal authorities. I sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this information with the family I thought I knew. My father wasn't just desperate or misguided. He was a criminal who had tried to steal from his own daughter. There's one more thing, David said gently. Social media analysis shows that several family members have been posting about your supposed penthouse gift for weeks before the wedding. Your brother's friends, Susan's family, even some of your extended relatives were already discussing it online. He showed me screenshots from Facebook and Instagram posts that made my humiliation complete. Bill had been telling people for a month that his amazing sister was giving them a penthouse as a wedding gift. Susan had posted pictures of furniture she planned to buy for our new place in the city. Even my cousin Rachel had shared posts about family generosity and supporting newlyweds. The wedding confrontation hadn't been a spontaneous disagreement. It had been the culmination of weeks of public promises and social media announcements that made backing down impossible for everyone involved. What are my options? I asked David. Several. You can file criminal charges for the attempted fraud. You can pursue restraining orders to prevent further contact or harassment. You can work with your attorney to bulletproof your assets against future schemes. He paused and looked at me seriously. But you should also prepare for escalation. People who are desperate enough to attempt fraud usually don't stop at the first failure. Your family now knows that you won't voluntarily help them, so they may try other methods. That evening, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and a legal pad, trying to process everything I had learned. My family wasn't just financially irresponsible. They were criminals who had been planning to steal from me for weeks. The wedding incident wasn't an emotional breakdown. It was the public failure of an elaborate scam. I thought about all the times growing up when money seemed tight, but my parents assured me everything was fine. All the times Dale worked late or went on business trips that I now realized were probably gambling binges. All the times Margaret seemed stressed about bills but changed the subject when I asked questions. My entire childhood had been built on financial lies and addiction, and I had been too trusting to see the signs. But I also thought about the strength I had shown at the wedding. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to family pressure and refused to sacrifice my well-being for their problems. I had drawn boundaries and maintained them even under extreme pressure. That strength would need to carry me through whatever came next, because David was right about one thing: desperate people don't give up easily. And my family was nothing if not desperate. Patricia Williams worked quickly to implement legal protections around my assets. Within a week of receiving David's investigation report, I had new bank accounts, updated insurance policies, and credit monitoring services that would alert me to any attempts to use my information fraudulently. The good news is that you're financially secure, Patricia explained during our second meeting. Your Penthouse deed is clear, your savings are protected, and we've flagged your credit with all 3 bureaus to prevent unauthorized applications. But security wasn't enough. The attempted fraud needed consequences, and I needed to send a clear message that stealing from me would not be tolerated. I want to press charges, I told her. Patricia nodded approvingly. The bank has already forwarded the forged documents to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They'll want to interview you and gather additional evidence, but the case is fairly straightforward. Filing the paperwork felt surreal. I was officially accusing my father of trying to steal my home. The language was cold and legal: fraudulent misrepresentation of financial authority, and attempted theft of real property valued at over $1 million. But the emotional reality was that I was sending my dad to federal prison. The interview with FBI agent Sarah Kim, The interview with FBI agent Jennifer Walsh took place in a sterile conference room downtown. Jennifer was professional and thorough, walking me through the timeline of events and the evidence David had collected. Unfortunately, we see cases like this more frequently than people realize, Jennifer said. Family financial fraud often goes unreported because victims don't want to destroy relationships. But in my experience, people who attempt fraud once will escalate if they face no consequences. She was right. 2 days after I filed the criminal complaint, David called with disturbing news. Your father tried to break into your building last night, he said without preamble. The security cameras caught him attempting to bypass the lobby entrance around 2 in the morning. Building security called the police, but he left before they arrived. My blood ran cold. Dale wasn't just desperate for money anymore, he was acting completely irrationally and potentially dangerously. What did the police say? They're treating it as attempted burglary since you've already filed fraud charges. Detective Rodriguez wants to meet with you this afternoon to discuss additional security measures. I spent the rest of the morning installing new deadbolts and upgrading my building's security system. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was barricading myself against my own father, but the alternative felt too dangerous to consider. Detective Rodriguez was a seasoned officer who had seen enough family violence to take the situation seriously. Domestic disputes that involve money often escalate quickly, he warned. Your father is facing federal charges, potential prison time, and public humiliation. That combination makes some people unpredictable. He recommended a temporary restraining order that would legally prevent Dale from coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. Margaret and Bill would be included in the order since they had participated in the financial pressure and public confrontation. But even as I was taking legal action, the court of public opinion was delivering its own justice. The wedding video had indeed gone viral, shared across social media platforms with hashtags like wedding drama, family crazy, and bridezilla. family. News blogs picked up the story, turning my family's meltdown into entertainment for millions of strangers. Jessica showed me some of the comments during lunch that week. Most people supported my position, calling my family entitled and abusive. Several people shared their own stories of family financial manipulation, creating an unexpected community of support around the viral video. You've become like a folk hero for people with toxic families, Jessica said, scrolling through hundreds of supportive comments. Look at this one. I wish I had been brave enough to say no when my parents demanded my inheritance. And this one, family doesn't mean free money. Good for her for standing up to bullies. The attention felt overwhelming, but it also validated my decision in ways I hadn't expected. For years, I had wondered if I was being selfish or unreasonable by prioritizing my own needs. Seeing thousands of strangers understand and support my position helped quiet the guilt that still lingered despite everything. But not everyone was supportive. Margaret had been calling my workplace, trying to reach me through my assistant. She left increasingly desperate voicemails that HR eventually asked me to report to security. She's claiming there's been a misunderstanding, my supervisor Tom explained. She says you're having a mental health crisis and that your family is trying to help you. The manipulation was breathtaking. After attempting to steal my property and physically assaulting me at a wedding, Margaret was now trying to portray me as mentally unstable and herself as a concerned mother. What did you tell her? I asked Tom. That you seem perfectly rational to me and that she needs to stop calling your workplace or will involve legal authorities, he replied. But heads up, she mentioned that she might try to contact your clients directly. That threat pushed me over the edge. It was one thing to attack me personally, but threatening my professional reputation crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I called Patricia immediately. Can we expand the restraining order to include my workplace and professional contacts? Absolutely. And given what you've told me, I think it's time to consider a more comprehensive legal strategy, she said. Your family is escalating their behavior despite criminal charges and media attention. They're not going to stop voluntarily. Patricia recommended filing a civil lawsuit for damages related to the attempted fraud, emotional distress, and professional interference. It won't get you money they don't have any, but it will create additional legal consequences and documentation of their behavior. The civil suit felt like the nuclear option, the final destruction of any possibility of family reconciliation. But as I thought about Dale attempting to break into my building and Margaret trying to sabotage my career, I realized that reconciliation had never been their goal. They wanted my money, and they were willing to destroy me to get it. Filing the civil lawsuit made the local news, which brought the story full circle from viral social media content to legitimate news coverage. The reporter, Maria Santos, interviewed me about financial family abuse and the responsibility successful adult children have to struggling relatives. I believe in helping family, I told her during the recorded interview. But help and theft are not the same thing. Love and manipulation are not the same thing. Supporting someone's success is not the same as demanding they sacrifice everything for your benefit. The interview aired during the evening news, bringing additional attention to my situation, but also highlighting the broader issue of family financial abuse. Several nonprofit organizations reached out to ask if I would speak at workshops about boundary setting and financial protection. But the real vindication came 2 weeks later when Jennifer Walsh called with an update on the criminal case. "We arrested your father this morning," she said simply. "The evidence was overwhelming, and he confessed to attempting the fraud. He'll be arraigned next week." Dale had finally faced real consequences for his actions. Not the emotional manipulation or family pressure he was used to employing, but actual legal accountability that couldn't be negotiated or charmed away. Margaret filed for divorce the same day Dale was arrested. According to David's sources, she had finally realized that her husband's gambling addiction would destroy whatever remained of their financial stability. She moved into a small apartment and started working part-time at a retail store, beginning the slow process of rebuilding her life at age 57. Bill and Susan declared bankruptcy and moved in with Susan's parents, who agreed to help them on the condition that Bill attend financial counseling and find stable employment. Their marriage survived, but barely, and Susan's family made it clear that future support depended on demonstrated responsibility. As for me, I began building a new life based on my own values rather than my family's expectations. The legal battles were exhausting and expensive, but they established clear boundaries that protected both my assets and my peace of mind. I started dating someone I met through work, a software engineer named David, who appreciated my independence and had no interest in my money. I began volunteering with organizations that helped people escape financially abusive relationships. I even started therapy to process the years of emotional manipulation I had accepted as normal family behavior. Most importantly, I learned that love without respect isn't really love at all. It's dependency manipulation and control disguised as affection. And I decided I deserved better than that. 1 year later, I stood on my penthouse balcony, watching the San Francisco fog roll in across the bay, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely at peace with my choices. The legal battles were over. My family had moved on to rebuilding their own lives, and I had created something I never thought possible: genuine happiness based on my own terms. Dale had served 8 months in federal prison for financial fraud and was now living in a halfway house in Sacramento, working at a warehouse job while attending mandatory gambling addiction counseling. The conviction would remain on his record forever, but Patricia said he seemed to have finally accepted the reality of his situation. He had written me 2 letters during his imprisonment, genuine apologies that acknowledged the depth of his betrayal, without asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I hadn't responded to the letters, but I kept them in a file folder labeled "Closure." Someday I might be ready to have a conversation with my father about what he had done and why. But for now, the distance between us felt necessary and healing. Margaret had surprised everyone, including herself, by thriving after her divorce. She completed a financial literacy course, found full-time work as an administrative assistant at a medical office, and moved into a small but comfortable apartment that she furnished entirely with her own earnings. According to occasional updates from extended family members, she was dating someone she met at a support group for families of addicts. She had called me once 6 months after Dale's arrest to apologize for her role in the wedding incident and the years of enabling behavior that preceded it. The conversation was awkward and painful, but it ended with a mutual agreement to take time apart while she continued working on herself in therapy. "I realize now that we taught you to sacrifice yourself for everyone else's problems," she had said during that call. "I'm proud that you were strong enough to refuse, even though we made it as difficult as possible." That apology had meant more to me than months of legal vindication. It represented the first time my mother had truly seen me as an individual with rights and needs, rather than just a family resource to be managed. Bill and Susan were still married, still struggling financially, but slowly building a stable life together. Bill had found steady work as a customer service manager at a tech startup, and Susan was completing a certification program to become a medical billing specialist. They lived in a modest apartment in Oakland and drove used cars, but they were paying their bills and beginning to understand the relationship between financial choices and consequences. Susan had written to me around the holidays, a careful letter that expressed remorse for her assumption that my property should automatically become theirs. She acknowledged that the pressure from my parents had influenced her expectations, but she took responsibility for her own entitled attitude about my success. I understand now why you fought so hard to protect what you had earned, she wrote. I hope someday we can rebuild our relationship as real sisters-in-law rather than as people who use each other. I appreciated the sentiment, but I wasn't ready for family relationships that required me to pretend the past hadn't happened. Maybe in a few more years when I felt confident that new boundaries would be respected. The most surprising development had been my relationship with extended family members who reached out after the wedding incident became public. Uncle Joe and Aunt Linda had invited me to dinner several times, sharing stories about Dale's behavior over the years that they had witnessed but felt unable to address. Cousin Rachel, who had initially seemed entertained by the drama, eventually apologized for filming the confrontation and expressed genuine concern about family dynamics she was only beginning to understand. These relationships felt different because they were based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Nobody expected me to solve their problems or sacrifice my well-being for theirs. Nobody assumed my success belonged to everyone else. Professionally, the year had been remarkable. The media attention from the viral wedding video had led to speaking opportunities about financial boundaries and family relationships. I had addressed conferences, workshops, and support groups, sharing my experience to help others recognize and resist financial manipulation. More surprisingly, the attention had also led to a promotion at work. My boss had been impressed by my composure during interviews and my willingness to speak publicly about difficult topics. You handled an incredibly challenging situation with grace and intelligence, he told me during my performance review. Those are exactly the leadership qualities we value. My new role as Director of Strategic Marketing came with additional responsibilities, travel opportunities, and a significant salary increase. For the first time, I was earning enough money that I could consider investing in real estate or starting my own business if I chose to. But more important than professional success was the personal growth I had experienced through therapy and new relationships. Dr. Rebecca Martinez had helped me understand the psychological patterns that had made me vulnerable to family manipulation. I learned to recognize guilt trips, emotional blackmail, and the subtle ways that love can be weaponized to control behavior. You were trained from childhood to believe that your worth came from what you could provide for others. Dr. Martinez had explained during one particularly insightful session. Breaking that programming takes time and practice, but you're learning to value yourself for who you are rather than what you can give. The relationship with David, the software engineer, not the private investigator, had deepened into something I never expected to find. He was genuinely content with his own life and income, completely uninterested in my financial success, except as something that made me happy. When I told him about the Penthouse incident, his response was simply, "I'm sorry your family treated you that way. You deserve better." He never asked about my money, never suggested ways I could help his family or friends, never made me feel responsible for anyone's problems except my own. After a lifetime of relationships that came with hidden expectations and unspoken obligations, being with someone who truly wanted nothing from me except my company felt revolutionary. We had been talking about moving in together, combining our lives in a way that felt like partnership rather than dependency. The conversation excited me instead of terrifying me, which felt like progress. Standing on my balcony that evening, watching the city lights reflect on the water, I thought about the different types of family that were possible. The biological family that had raised me had taught me important lessons about work ethic, education, and ambition. But they had also taught me that love came with conditions and that my value lay in what I could provide rather than who I was. The chosen family I had built over the past year, friends like Jessica and Marcus colleagues who supported my career growth, David and his genuine affection, even Dr. Martinez and her professional guidance had taught me that real love involves respect boundaries and mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. I had lost the family I was born into, but I had gained something much more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved relationships based on equality and respect rather than exploitation and guilt. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Wine night tomorrow. I want to hear about your presentation to the Financial Abuse Prevention Conference." I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. I have so much to tell you." As I headed back inside my beautiful penthouse, the home I had earned and protected and refused to sacrifice, I felt grateful for every difficult choice that had led me to this moment. The pain of losing my family had been real and lasting, but the freedom to build a life based on my own values had been worth every tear and every sleepless night. I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who can't love you properly. Sometimes protecting your peace requires disappointing people who have never prioritized your happiness. Sometimes the family that raises you isn't the family you need to keep. And sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the first step toward finding everything you actually deserve. Have you ever had to choose between your own well-being and family expectations? What's the most difficult boundary you've had to set with someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family dynamics and finding the courage to prioritize your own needs. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. I hope it reminds you that your happiness and security matter just as much as everyone else's, and that real love never requires you to sacrifice your entire life for someone else's benefit. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to put yourself first sometimes. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you deserve relationships that celebrate your success rather than exploit it.